Jim scanned left and tried to spot roadside bombs, while Mac scanned right and watched for gunmen. It was early 2007, and Jim and the Iraqi police he advised were roaming a part of Baghdad that Petraeus' surge troops had not yet occupied. He and his small U.S. team had bonded with his Iraqi counterparts so closely that together they could go places that other U.S. units could not. The overcrowded Shiite slum of 2 million people in the middle of Baghdad rarely saw a daytime patrol by American forces. Apart from conducting night raids, they mainly stayed out of the area. Sadr City was ruled by the main Shiite militia, known as the Mahdi Army, or Jaish al-Mahdi, JAM, which used the slum as a safe haven for staging attacks on Sunnis and U.S. forces across Baghdad. Sectarian killing was rife in Baghdad and other religiously mixed parts of Iraq, and the country was teetering on the brink of civil war. The Shiite militias had become as much of a threat to U.S. forces as the Sunni insurgents. But Jim had managed to gain safe passage through the area from Mahdi army commanders, who ordered their fighters not to strike his patrols. So his Humvees, easily identified by the crimson Spartan helmets spray-painted on their doors, were able to roll through Sadr City exposed but unscathed. A Shiite militiaman with an AK-47 slung over his shoulder waved the vehicle through one of the makeshift checkpoints that ringed Sadr City. The Humvee moved through dusty markets and streets that stank from sewage running through the gutters and paused in front of a small hospital. One of Jim's Iraqi comrades went in to pick up a policeman who had been shot in a Baghdad raid a few days before. Sadr City was the only place the Shiite policeman could safely receive treatment. Shiites taken to Sunni hospitals in the city would often disappear, never to be seen again. Jim had volunteered to go to Iraq in 2006. As a newly promoted major, he could no longer fight alongside the men he had led as a captain in 2003 and 2004 on his Special Forces team, Operational Detachment Alpha ODA 316, when they returned to combat in Afghanistan. It was how the system worked, but it was painful for Jim. The Army machine had to rotate officers through a limited number of command positions, but breaking up teams could hurt cohesion and morale. Jim felt incredibly guilty about not deploying with the men he'd taught to hunger for combat. The ache intensified in August 2005, when the comrades he'd loved most in the world faced their toughest battle in Afghanistan, and one of them died fighting. Jim was proud of his men, brothers all, but devastated he was not by their side. So Jim felt compelled to join the fray in Iraq, where the violence and U.S. casualties were escalating sharply. Having tested himself against Afghan insurgents, he wanted to find out what kind of enemy the Iraqis were. The American general in charge of training Iraqi forces, Brigadier General Dan Bolger, offered him a position leading a small U.S. military team advising Iraqi forces. Jim accepted immediately and gave his team the call sign Spartan. Over the next 14 months, he would see the heaviest fighting of his life, sharpening his combat skills like never before. Yet the bloodshed and constant danger deeply scarred him psychologically. At the same time, his work with the Iraqis opened his eyes to the potential for comradeship and trust with indigenous forces that built on his Afghanistan experience and went beyond what he had ever imagined possible. In Iraq, he led a non-American unit in battle for the first time, and grew even more convinced of the power of bonding with and motivating a foreign force. But it didn't start out that way. When Jim arrived in Baghdad in June 2006, the city was in the throes of the worst sectarian slaughter in its history. Warring between Iraq's majority Shiite and minority Sunni religious factions had exploded following the February 2006 bombing by Sunni extremists of one of the Shiites' holiest shrines, the Al-Askari Mosque in the contested city of Samarra. Thousands of Iraqi civilians were fleeing their homes as sectarian cleansing and execution